So thank you for sticking with us this afternoon. I am Jess Warner, a director and partner at Lansons. Lansons work with governments, industry bodies and companies in the blockchain space, as well as other sectors, to help them build, protect and manage their reputations. And a really important part of what we do is media relations for our clients. So engaging with the media, because having a good news story about you or a bad can ultimately make or break the success of your organization, and could overnight make or destroy your reputation. So we have three experts in this space who are acutely aware of their power. They are the newsmakers, the trendsetters. So really pleased to introduce, not quite the lineup up here, but Doug McKenzie from FinTech Finance, and we've got Jamie Crawley from FinExtra and James Bowater from Crypto AM, City AM's crypto specialist. Woo! So thanks so much for joining all, and I'll start with you, James. And just wanted to reflect on, as an industry, there's a lot of hype, isn't there? There's a lot of noise. How do you pick through all of that and find out what the really interesting stories are? And what advice would you have for people here trying to get noticed amongst that crowd?
Well, I think, yes, you're right. There is a hell of a lot of hype, and there always has been, especially, there's the hangover from the ICO sort of craziness. And I think, that's taken us a long time to get over. In terms of finding out who I want to get involved with and all the rest of it, I think the most important thing is to get out there and meet people face to face as much as possible. It doesn't always just work to get a basket full of emails going, look at my thing, look at my thing, look at my thing. Because also you want to make sure that hopefully, that when you do engage, you're not dealing with a scammer or a whatever person as well. So that's quite important to be able to disseminate. And I think that can only be accomplished by actually talking directly with them.
So before you report on a company or an individual in this space, do you do quite a lot of due diligence to make sure that they are legitimate and that you're not writing and endorsing anyone
as much as possible, for sure. I mean, I think in the 2 years that I've been doing Crypto AM, I think I've had one cock-up, which I'm not going to talk about. That became quite evident quite quickly. But I think also City AM's, I've got Crypto AM within City AM slightly different from what these other guys do, in as much as it's more of I'm more curating interesting content, and obviously the key feature of Spotlight is to help new companies expose themselves a bit as well as others who are more established but haven't got their message out yet. But yeah, no, it's not easy to filter, let's put it that way. But I think meeting and showing up is a key thing.
Great, yeah. Thank you. So, I mean, on the it's not easy to filter point, Doug, it'd be good to get your take on product launches, because I know that there are lots every day. I imagine that's a big part of what clogs up your inbox. So when you're seeing those come through, how do you decide what's an exciting product, what are you going to write about, and what's just, another very exciting for the company themselves, but possibly not for your readers and the wider community?
Definitely, yeah. I think that's a big part of this industry's problem. It's making those what might be very exciting, as you said, for their company, turning it into an actual news story that is actually publishable, putting it on a video, and turning that use case for that company into a mass case for either readers and the wider audience as a whole. We get so many press releases which are just filled with very intense jargon, coming from the media side of things into the fintech scene. And you're having that learning curve over the last half a decade. When you're presented with something that's not very easily translatable, even to me who knows the industry, it's then translating that into more content. And by that time, is it actually worth it at that point? So I think there's an effort needs to be made to democratize the language used in the industry. Financial services is already niche enough without then obviously having that tech element to it, and I think that's a really important thing to really hammer home those mass cases as well as the use cases, and actually turning those what could be done into what should be done. And if that's brought across in at least the opening salvo of the 100 press releases you get, I think you'll go a lot further to getting your message out there. But yeah, I think that covers that.
And I just touch on something that actually we spoke about before the panel, in terms of another thing that's going to prompt you to open that email and to read that particular press release. And you mentioned, Doug, that actually that does come back to having a relationship in the first place, and you actually knowing the company, knowing the individual, or knowing the press office, whoever's getting in touch with you. So that remains as important as ever when it comes to engaging with the media.
Definitely. It sounds really typically old school, I guess, but having that, people by people, and knowing if you make a cold call effectively or a cold email with your very exciting press launch, and you don't want fake niceties, but for instance, having that personalized kind of talk, this is what we're trying to showcase, it goes a long way for the press. For instance, I'm not going to name names, but I got an email the other day saying, hi, it would be really good to connect to talk about my new blockchain technology. We share very similar experiences and passions. And I thought, I've never met you. Okay, it was almost like a dating app. It goes a long way to actually having that personalized talk, maybe asking to showcase the product first, or meeting at a previous location, to kind of break down that barrier of just the insane amount of cold emails you get about the incredible amount of products, which are probably incredible, but it's breaking down that barrier, that first initial, because there's only so many you can cover before it's just effectively just white noise. You're releasing so many press releases, so many videos about so many products. You want to make good content and not just wash out with just middling to poor content.
Thank you. So it's about relationships, and it's about democratizing the language. On that latter point, Jamie, I'd be interested to get your take on an observation that I've got about the industry, which is, we haven't had too much of it at this conference, but I think as a whole, everyone is far too navel-gazing and obsessed with the technology, and not enough around storytelling about what's their product actually trying to solve, what's the real-world problem that we're looking to address here. What's your take on that?
I tend to agree. I think you phrase it in the right way. A comparison I often find quite applicable with blockchain is comparing it to the early days of the internet. And I doubt very much that in the early days of the internet, there were many technology companies or PRs who were pricking journalists or the media's interest by talking about the intricacies of TCP/IP and everything, or HTML or anything like that. What drove the internet was use cases and it was user experience. So it was email and it was e-commerce. It was taking the everyday, the mundanity of everyday life of communicating, transacting, shopping, and putting it online. That's what I'm really looking for from in blockchain is when we get to that point where when you can send someone a press release, you can pitch someone something, and you don't even need to mention blockchain anywhere in it. It's just self-evident that that is what lies at its core. Don't care about the intricacies of the technology. Is what are you trying to achieve here? How is this going to empower consumers? How is it going to make companies' lives easier? Bless you. And how is it, like you say, what is the end product? Why should I care?
Okay, so a question for all of you then. Who is doing this well? Who is talking about the solutions? Who's writing a good press release? Who is investing in relationships with you and telling a good story?
I'll throw one forward and link to what I just said, and it's a company I've spoke to a number of times. It's eToro. I'm sure you're very familiar with them, and I think that kind of, to my point, is why they're obviously doing a good job. What I was just saying is blockchain lies at the core of what they do. They're a social trading platform. They offer crypto. They've got a number of stable coins pegged to fiat currencies, commodities, and as well as Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and so on. And and blockchain is fairly divorced from it. It's self-evident that it lies at their core. What they're doing is taking something that not a lot of people engage with, which is investing, making yourself financially independent, and making it a social online experience. And I think I'm sure everyone's seen there's a few months ago you can never load a YouTube video without their advert popping up at the start, and now watch a Premier League game this weekend, you'll see their name plastered across half the billboards in about half a dozen games and behind Jurgen Klopp's face, hopefully, after Liverpool have got back to winning ways against Bournemouth.
I think the other thing that is important, actually, which I took them out, is companies who might not quite be ready yet, but who are actually doing a hell of a good job of educating. And I think that, just since we're naming names, two have sort of struck me recently. One is a company called Coiny, who's aiming to be a digital custodian. They've invested their own money into the project. That's another big boon to a story, is if they've actually backed themselves. So the other example would be Kudo. And then there's another company called World Mobile. And what they all have in common is that they've all, funded themselves at the outset, maintained a bit of stealth, but as part of their journey of going off to do their money raising and all that kind of stuff, and WireX even as well is another good example, who are doing a Series B at the moment. They're educating people through networking and through hosting events, and institutions need to understand what their digital custodian is going to be doing. So that's a good one. It's sharing it's taking the jargon out, showing what actually the practicalities are and why they're going to make a difference. So I think those companies at the moment stand out to me off the top of my head. Who? Monolith. Yeah. No, you introduced me to them. See, that's called relationship at Ethereum.
There we go, live. Doug, what do you think?
And if I could also, I completely agree with you, Jamie. And also it's kind of having that blockchain capability, but having it behind the scenes and not having to flaunt it. I talk a lot about open banking. I talk all the time about how amazing open banking is. But at the end of the day, I don't think any of my friends or family know a thing about open banking, but they know the positives that have come about from the payments revolution as a result of it. And maybe if we stop talking about the specifics behind the technology, and again, going back to that use cases, for instance, as you said, eToro, having that platform that works, that uses the technology, I think that could be a really interesting outcome. We're very tech focused, when actually maybe, we should be looking at the product.
So the fun question, who's doing it badly? Who have been the PR car crashes or disasters that you've seen?
I've been offered, advertorial type, again, not going to name names, but it's more than a couple, to have adverts on our site or in videos, paid for in their own cryptocurrencies and everything like that. That's just a no-go, really.
Yeah.
Well, I'm concurring with that. We've got no facility to take crypto at Crypto.am. It's ridiculous, but it's true. I've been trying to find the right partner for that for some time. I also don't want our bank accounts to be shut.
Yeah.
So, that's another sidebar on it. But until we get our banking and our regulatory side sorted out so that there is no, I could name names, but there are certain banks that just know what their client's business model is, and the minute they push the button to start trading, say, "Oh no, we can't do that," and shut their accounts down. It's not cool.
Yeah, again, not naming names, but I suppose when I subconsciously switch off is when you get the feeling someone's just being slightly overly evangelical. This is a revolution. This is going to change the world. This is the new internet. Despite what I said a minute ago, so I'm kind of treading on my own toes, I suppose.
Web 3.0.
That sort of thing. I think what I would favour a little bit of caution, cautious engagement. If you, it's very easy, it seems, to slip into overdrive, and it's very difficult to remain engaged with those sorts of people.
Yeah, understood. So I think just going on from that and understanding more, because you've given some really useful guidance, I think, to everyone on how they should work for you. Getting more granular, what does your week look like? What are your top tips for people engaging you? How should they get hold of you? How do they go about getting their name in the press? Jamie, if you start.
If you want to get your name in the press, don't think about trying to appeal to us. We're not, not trying to do down the industry in which I'm trying to make a living. But as a journalist, what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the banks. I'm looking at large companies. So I think if you can get a blockchain company or a startup of some description, if you can get a level of engagement with an HSBC or a Barclays or a MasterCard or a Visa, I think you're 50% there. Kind of what you were saying before is if you're looking at a press release and there's an attached to a major bank or a major company like that, then it would. It sort of makes all the difference in the world, and it sort of leaps out the screen at you a bit more.
Well, my experience obviously is a little bit different, because I mean, I'm certainly not going to class myself as a journalist. As I was mentioning before, I'm not trained to be a journalist. Have I got my spacing right, Robert, yet? No, oh Lord. Anyway, no. What I was going to say is that actually, I've got a different sort of thought process. I mean, obviously my email address and everything's published in the newspaper anyway, so I can't really hide from that. But I actively go out and meet the community and try and build the community from a hands-on method. So I've created the London Blockchain Forum just for that purpose. There was way too many infighting, siloed. People said mine's better than yours and all that sort of stuff. But actually, that needs to go. It's rather like the navel-gazing thing. But I mean, if the community can actually just work together, you don't have to share your secrets, for heaven's sake. But there's nothing wrong with sort of, recognizing that collectively we need to work together, be interoperable, we need to scale, and we need to be usable. I mean, that's the only way this is ever going to achieve mass adoption anyway. So I'm a bit more proactive, I guess. So I want to meet everyone, and I put on a lot of weight in the last 2 years. I think I might have to go to a clinic soon.
It's a sociable industry. And Doug, in terms of working with you guys, I mean, again, something we were chatting about was the extent to which all publications are pay to play, and that's obviously not undermining the editorial integrity of all of you, but ultimately, FinTech Finance, Finextra, CityAM, CryptoAM, your businesses, right? So how does that work? What's that balance like?
Definitely. We partner with a lot of events typically, and obviously we're there with a camera crew, and it's one of those things where it's a marketing manager or a PR manager's dream when they see a camera team offering to do interviews at an event for free. And it's one of those things where obviously you build these relationships over the course of a couple of years, and some become very successful, get adopted by these banks, and you kind of see that growth, but it becomes one of those things where you then say to these companies that maybe you have given a lot of free press to, and you say, hey, would you like to be a part of our platform as well in terms of media and kind of back and forth effectively in that. and do something paid for, advertorial. Because, again, these products don't change too much. And ultimately, when you're in journalism or press, about product launches, there's only so much you can talk about. And so you do need that, as you said, that advertorial side of flow. And so I really do think there has to be this effective negotiation on the table where you say up front, we're just starting out, we love this content, we love your guys' platform, we'd love to work with you down the line sometime with something advertorial. But it's when you're speaking to a lot of large fintechs, and they come over all happy and at events, at conferences, and say, or privately over the phone say, hey, can we have an episode on us? And sometimes we've looked at some companies and said, well, we've done 6 episodes on you for free. Is there any chance you'd like to go for an advert? And that's when we've often had a lot of people just say, oh maybe next year. We've just done our budget, and you're thinking, oh okay, going to a conference that costs $8,000 or whatever. So I think there has to be this kind of back and forth. Otherwise, if it's just all one way, then it's just never gonna. The industry's never. It's unsustainable.
I mean, it's a massively important issue, and I think that, I mean, certainly, speaking for the newspaper I partner with, City AM's been around for 14 and a half years. It's free, it's handed out. So obviously, it doesn't pay for itself. So adverts in there have to, contribute to they do fund the overheads. But within Crypto AM, I try and keep a 50-50 balance of, potentially sponsored content versus invited content. So I try to be as strict as I can be on that. So I've got obviously my own column, but then the guest main feature I'm quite protective over, and it's not designed for people to shout about their brands or stuff. It's more to do with education. And then obviously we've got industry voices as well, which is another opportunity for people to write an essay that's topical at the time. But getting people to part with pounds, yeah, I told you that. I haven't got the facility. No, it's to get people to part with money. It's always a hard question, isn't it? But I think and I'm going to sort of be bit brutal, what pisses me off completely is when there are companies that you've either helped out and then they do get their money in and then they don't come back to you. That's a bit of a slap in the face. And I think also the other one is when full well that the company coffers are full and you're helping and you've been helping and then they're just not supportive back. It just shoots the relationship in the foot.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in paid content as long as the reader's aware. That's all.
I think at FinExtra we're quite lucky in as far as we've been around for a long time, and FinExtra for me is as much a community as much as anything else, as well as news and comment analysis sort of thing I work on. We also do a lot of research papers and organise events akin to this, and we have a lot of video output similar to what Doug's been talking about. So we've got a sort of a very vibrant sort of 30,000 strong community. So there is a lot of room for engagement on some level or other. And don't ask me, I'm not a salesman, but at some point or other, I'm sure some money exchanges hands at some point.
I actually asked one of our sales team, who was inquiring about a fintech that we'd been doing a lot of free content for a number of years. Finally, about maybe asking if they would like to put up for an advert. And even though we knew this person for 4 years, they said to her that they categorically don't pay for advertorial or content. And I thought, what on earth at all? And yeah, that was literally their answer. That they just assumed that in this new media environment that we're in, with YouTube, and everyone gets really excited about it, that there is no, you don't need to pay for anything because everyone's so excited about everything. But it goes back to that whole thing of there's so much content now. If you're not making good content and you're not paying for it, which is obviously, you get good content typically by paying for it, then you're going to get lost really quickly in all the white noise.
Yeah, it's a surefire way to irritate a lot of publications, isn't it? So we've got about 4 minutes left. I've got a couple of final questions, but just wanted to see if anyone else in the audience had one. Otherwise, I'll keep going. I'll keep going. So just wanted to wrap up really thinking about the future, thinking about trends and what you see as being really big and exciting this year and kind of looking 5 years ahead, because, in your roles, you're a good bellwether for where this sector's going, what's exciting, what makes a story. So would love to hear that from each of you to round up.
I would say in the short to medium term, it'd be centrally about digital currencies, which is what I'm looking at. Some of you may here for the panel on that yesterday, which was my one of my highlights of the event. Whether or not what we're going to see this year, I'm not sure. Maybe that's more of an 18, 24 month time period. But it is. I think there's a lot of scope for that to really accelerate. For example. The US, for example, is certainly not going to take a wait-and-see approach if China's well-known intentions to launch a digital currency come to fruition. That will certainly light a fire under the US. Well, exactly. So that's what I'm looking. That's what I'm looking at, and broadly in the more long term. A piece of work I've got coming up quite soon is on the future of blockchain, looking at things like smart contracts and identity and banking the unbanked, thinking broadly, this is where we are now, this is where we could go, this is where we want to go, how do we get from A to B?
Thanks, Toby.
And for me, it's definitely been, I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago about blockchain with a chap from PumaPay, and it's what they're pushing is this kind of changing the way that we pay for things. And I thought that was really interesting because a lot of the fintech revolution that I've seen to become successful has come about through the payment side of things. When people found out that they could send money to their friends through one app rather than having to type in bank details every single time, that's when we actually started getting traction on the ground. And so what them and other companies are doing is changing the way that organizations and companies can actually take funds from accounts. It becomes far more a relationship rather than just banks to banks sending money. It's pulling money out of accounts rather than just pushing it. Subscriptions like Netflix, it's going to transform the way we pay for things. I think that's really going to be quite exciting.
Well, I think there's a certain degree of naivety as well that exists. We're quite far away, I think, from having the full infrastructure that's required. So that's obviously an important part. Obviously the protocol guys are busy building, and then usability and then the regulatory side of things will have a huge impact on that. But I'm also very excited to see how the blend of AI and blockchain can actually advance things, and so I think that's going to be an interesting one to watch.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. We're out of time, so thank you so much for those final insights and also for sharing thoughts on how to work with you. I would summarise as be solution-focused, invest in those relationships, take the time to educate, and sometimes it pays to pay. Thank you.
Thank you.